Welcome to the GTN Show. On this week's show, we are talking about a triathlete who has won the Winter Spine race, as well as a triathlete who has run a super fast half marathon that's actually fast even for any runner.
Yeah. Plus, the T100 have announced almost all the rest of their contracted athletes for the series for this year, and RaceRanger is going to debut in an age group race.
And we are going to continue the conversation that Mark and James started last week about the decline of triathlon, but we're going to be focusing on the entry costs. Are they just simply too high?
Starting as we always do with some of the stuff we've noticed on the internet, and quite a lot this week actually. Starting, as Heather said, with a very fast triathlete running a half marathon. And this is Morgan Pearson, who ran the Houston half marathon this past weekend in a 1:01:01, a 61:01, which is a new PB for him by only 7 seconds, but still a PB over the half marathon. He actually said medium results for me in Houston today. 1:01:01 for 15th place overall. Was hoping for a bit more, but my legs just weren't there. And if you can run a 1:01 half marathon and your legs just weren't there, well, big things to come. In fact, he's just signed with Hoka. He announced that this week too, as a new sponsored athlete by Hoka, focusing on the journey to LA 2028, which he is actually hoping to do as both a triathlete and a runner. So we saw Taylor Knibb do it as a cyclist and a triathlete in the last Olympic Games. He's hoping to qualify as both a runner and a triathlete in that Olympic Games, which will be very interesting to watch.
I feel that's got to be harder than cycling and triathlon. Just a bit more damage on the legs, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel like that too, but we'll see.
Yeah, exciting, but crazy fast. More excitement. It's that time of year, isn't it, when sponsorships are being announced. And Marjolaine Pierre has just announced that she is teaming with Canyon, which is very cool. And she's just done a nice reel and on a very shiny bike. And I think that's a very well-deserved partnership. Yeah,
definitely. Canyon's got all the best triathletes on them. Meanwhile, Lucy Buckingham has announced she's pregnant.
Aww.
Congratulations to her and husband, of course. She said a massive shout out to Hoka EU and T100 Triathlon for their continued support during my athlete/pregnancy journey, and a big thank you also to BMC Pro Tri for their belief and support in me over the last couple of years. Obviously, as a professional athlete, getting pregnant it's almost like an injury that's going to take you out for a year or more. That's obviously a big worry when your earnings going to get knocked by that whole process. And these days, it's really good to see both brands and also race organizers recognizing this and supporting female athletes through pregnancies.
Definitely. And that leads us really nicely onto the next post. However, I want to just quickly touch on the fact that Bucko was, her husband, was actually a presenter for a very short period on GTN, if those of you who've been here from the start. So that's another, I think we've got a slight claim as another GTN baby on the way.
Oh, right, okay, cool.
You see where I'm going. But back to the pregnancy note, British Triathlon have just announced that they have got a deferral option if you become pregnant for their age group athletes. So if you've qualified to represent Great Britain, then you have up to 2 years to defer that whilst you have your baby get fit again. And apparently they are the first governing body to do so for age group athletes, so leading the way on that front. And I know I've seen a lot of people, actually quite a few people message me saying, oh, Heather, have you heard this? This is really good news. So it's just really exciting and a nice move in kind of the right direction, I feel, for women's sport.
Feels like progress, doesn't it?
It does.
Moving on, the Spine race, we mentioned it last week, and last week we couldn't really bring you the results because we were still dot watching. And the Spine race, well, it takes a long time, doesn't it? Not for nothing, because it's 268 miles up the Pennine Way. Now, last time we spoke about the south, which is the first half, and then kind of the finish line. And then there's the north, which is the second half and the finish line. And then there's the crazy people who do the whole 268-mile thing.
And I mean, just so much of that in darkness. I just find it hard to sort of fathom that on Sunday, they started and we went to bed Sunday night, we went to bed Monday night, we went to bed Tuesday night, and we had lived our normal days and they were still running.
Yep, just trudging on through the snow and sludge and ice. And it is absolutely amazing. Kim Collinson took the win on the men's race. I'm just looking for his time here. 82 hours and 46 minutes. And I can tell you that in all that time, he slept probably about 2 hours in total in 82 hours of running an ultramarathon. All through the day, all through the night,
yeah,
30-minute naps occasionally.
Can't fathom it.
It is absolutely mind-boggling.
One of the incredible things about him, he actually came back for the fourth time having DNF'd on all three attempts leading up to this. So then having DNF'd to then win it is got to be pretty sweet, isn't it? I mean, maybe worth that amount of lack of sleep?
I don't know about that. Meanwhile, on the women's side, a triathlete took the win. Now, this is a bit of a story, and we won't get into all of it here, but you can go and read her blog because it is very interesting. Basically, Lucy Gossage finished second last year in the Spine race with her then boyfriend, and everything kind of unraveled 5 days later in her life, and it's quite the story. It kind of put a big damper on her entire memory of the Spine race, and she didn't want to leave the Spine race like that. So she came back for a bit of a redemption run, and boy, did she knock it out the park.
Oh my gosh, didn't she? I mean, she was in second place when you guys presented it when you filmed last Monday, but then I think took a considerable lead and just stormed away with it. And I don't think we can even begin to even discuss the emotions that she must have had. But I would suggest going to check out her social media, which was covered actually by another pro athlete, Nikki Bartlett, but also her blog that James has talked about. There's just a really interesting backstory, and you can only just sort of begin to slightly imagine how she must have felt at the
And most of her posts from the whole thing, because Lucy is a very bubbly and effervescent personality, are very positive, and she's smiling and she's chatting away to all the people around it. But she did post one post from the middle of the third night where she is blubbing incoherently and crying like a 5-year-old girl who's been really upset and can't stop herself crying. And it really does put into perspective exactly what this race takes. It is crazy. Anyway, congrats to her and to Kim Connaughton for taking the win on those ones.
Respect.
That one is not on my bucket list.
Yeah, just massive respect. On to slightly more light-hearted posts. Joe Skipper has been on holiday, and he's just put this post, which I think quite a few athletes might relate to, of you see a lovely big open pool at your holiday resort and you think, how can I turn that into a training pool? And whether Joe actually did or not, or whether he was just dreaming about setting up some buoys, but he reckoned with some kids inflatables and a 5-litre bottle of water filled with something heavy, then you could make your buoys and swim up and down and just annoy all the other
make some
holiday
turn
makers.
buoys. Yeah, I think you probably would annoy a few holiday makers.
Way not to make friends on holiday.
Yeah, exactly. I also thought Laura Philipp posted this one. How many Lauras can you spot in that picture, Heather?
This is like spot the difference. How long have we got? You didn't warn me on this one.
It's a lot of Lauras.
Well, I can spot Sebastian Keeley wearing a lot of Lauras, but again, I don't know how many.
I like Sebastian Keeley's post on that one, his reply to that one.
Yeah.
He's put a little meme on there, which pretty much sums it up how he's feeling about wearing that shirt.
Do you reckon he was paid to wear that? I would love to know. Well, it does look as though Laura is just enjoying her sort of riding the wave after that Ironman World Championship title win, and I think she's going to be back to work soon as her schedule is announced. We'll talk about later, but just great to see her having fun, doing podcasts, and just living a bit of the best life out of Lycra for a moment. Yeah.
Moving on with the final thing we've noticed on the internet this week, and that is that Sam Laidlow has announced his race schedule, including the Challenge Sir Banias, which is a very interesting concept race where you basically get on a cruise ship for 5 days. The cruise ship is your hotel, and you sail to an island and then do the triathlon on the island with the cruise ship staying as your hotel, and then you sail back again over a whole 5-day journey, which sounds pretty epic. So Sam Laidlow signed up, as well as Sarah Perez Sala. Interesting, though, because when you look at his race calendar, just 6 days previous, he's going to be racing Ironman South Africa, which is a Pro Series race, a big one on the calendar, and he's only got 2 Ironmans on his calendar, so a very important one for that Pro Series. So I assume he's just going for the party in Abu Dhabi.
I mean, he's going to hope that it's good recovery after jumping on a flight. You've got to make sure, first of all, you make the boat in time to get to the next race, quite literally. But yeah, I mean, it does sound like it could be used as a bit of a holiday as well, maybe.
Yeah. The rest of his calendar: 4th of May, 70.3 Venice, 70.3 Aix-en-Provence, 15th of September, Ironman Worlds in Nice, and then the 70.3 Worlds in Marbella on the 9th of November. So a very slimmed down calendar for him. No T100s in there, not many short distances. It's all just focusing on the important ones.
And no high rocks.
And no high rocks.
Funny that.
Yeah.
And now it's time for Tri News, and the triathlon season is kicking off down under. We've got Challenge Wānaka coming up soon, and they have just announced that they're teaming up with RaceRanger to put the RaceRanger device on all of the age group athletes, which is quite a big first. We've seen it being used for the pros and being rolled out over the last couple of years, and obviously it's a time-consuming and quite expensive device, yet it does, by using a light, show people how far away you are, whether you're in that drafting zone or not. And it's quite a big move, isn't it, to move it into into the age group field.
It is, and they're very clear that this is a trial, that this is not necessarily going to change the race or anything like that just yet. But they are trialing it on at least 300 of the bikes out there in the age group field, and to see what kind of data they get and also what it kind of does to the field. RaceRanger CEO James Elvery said, "We firmly established RaceRanger as part of the furniture in the pro ranks at the top level events around the world over the past 2 years, and now have our sights firmly set on getting to the age group fields in the next 12 to 18 months. It's going to require some adaptations to the way the system works, both how the athlete interacts with it on course and how we operate in the back end at events to make it more scalable." There's obviously a lot of technology that goes into it, and if you put hundreds of athletes around one device, it's not going to work. Whereas obviously in the pro field, it's a lot easier to sort that out. So there's a fair amount of things they need to figure out before this is going to work in all the age group fields. The other question is, of course, how much do you need this in all the age group fields? But we'll leave that for now. We might have a discussion on that in an upcoming show. But for now, we'll leave it there. We do think it's a good step in the right direction, bringing technology in to make races more fair and more safe. CEO of Challenge Family, Jort Vlam, said, "Challenge Family have supported RaceRanger from the very first trials, and we are delighted to once again be involved through Challenge Wānaka as they introduce their groundbreaking technology to the age group market." Now, James Elvery has also suggested that perhaps to implement this down the line, they could separate age group fields into competitive, as in racing to win your age group, whatever, and the rest. And the competitive ones can have the RaceRanger on, make sure it's a safe, fair race, and the rest don't need to worry about that. They can just have chip timing, they can do their own race without too much bother about all this technology in their bike. Either way, we think it's a good development technologically, and look forward to seeing how it actually works on the ground in the race. We'll be watching closely.
I think you'll be watching with skepticism, aren't you, James?
I think it can work. I think it's probably not quite there yet.
Yeah, we shall see. Well, moving on to the T100, and we've been drip-fed the announcements of who has signed. We first had those official 8 that came from the ranking list, and then the 4 hotshots, that is men and then women. And we have now got the latest 2025 contracts, which brings us up to a total of 19 men and 19 women. So newly added to the men's contract, we've got Mika Newt, Gregory Barnaby, Justus Nyslag, Antonio Benito Lopez, Jason West, Nicholas Mann, and Amino Koolhaas.
Yeah, and then on the women's contract, we've got Emma Pallant-Brown, Caroline Poole, Ellie Salthouse, Els Visser, Marta Sanchez, Grace Tech, and Hannah Berry. And Hannah Berry actually just won this past weekend.
She did.
At the Tauranga half, she took the win there in a pretty strong field, actually. And Jack Moody took the win on the men's side. We may as well cover that now because it's literally the only race that happened this past weekend, because it's very much off-season in the rest of the world. But down in New Zealand, they're racing.
Yeah, exactly. But to finish off our Tri News, we have retirement, I think an official retirement notice from Andy Potts. If you remember, we're going back to the archives a few times here, he was on GTN and nicknamed the Muffin Man. If those of you have maybe not remembered seeing him racing recently, because he hasn't raced for a little while, has he?
He hasn't, no, but he gave some good breakfast advice back on GTN back in the day. He hasn't raced, he pretty much didn't race the whole of 2024. His last win, I think, was in 2022. He's officially announced his retirement. But at the same time, he's also announced that he's taken up a new role as the lead of USA Triathlon's para-triathlon resident team. Getting ready, obviously, for the Olympic Games that's going to happen in the US, in LA, in 2028. And he's going to lead that team. USA Triathlon say they are thrilled to welcome Andy Potts as the new coach of our para-triathlon resident team. Andy brings an extraordinary wealth of experience as an Olympian. He was an Olympian in 2004. It's going back a bit. 70.3 world champion, coach, and long-time leader in the triathlon community. So congrats, Andy Potts, on both your retirement and your new job. No rest for the wicked. Last week, Mark and I had a pretty in-depth discussion about the state of triathlon and whether it was dying, whether it was losing ground, whether people were just going away from it and no one was interested anymore. And obviously it kicked up a lot of discussion, but a lot of the discussion focused around it's just too expensive. The entry fees have just got too high. It is crazy expensive to do a triathlon. And when I say a lot of the comments, I'm talking hundreds of comments, and most of them were along the same lines of the entry fees are too much. So we did a bit of research on this because we figured it was worth delving into a little bit more. So we compared 2005, 20 years ago, to race entry fees this year. And basically, a sprint distance triathlon, $30 to $70 20 years ago, $75 to $150 now. So 2.5 times the price. Olympic, very similar, 50 to 120. 20 years ago, 100 to 250 dollars to enter now. Obviously, there's some variation in this. You can get much cheaper ones, you get more expensive ones, but this is the ballpark. And Ironman, $250 to $400 20 years ago, and now $600 to, well, over $1,000 for some of them. It's gone up, but also around about the 2.5 times mark, which is all kind of across the board. Now, that feels like a lot. It is a lot, actually.
It is, yes. And I think a lot of people are saying, oh, now maybe running is growing because running is cheaper. It doesn't have the same inflation that triathlon is having. However, we were, I think, a little bit surprised at this when we looked into the numbers of running. So again, we did the 20 years ago, so around 2005. A 5K race cost something between 10 to 20 US dollars to enter, and now between 25 to 50. So more than 2 times, up to 2.5 times the price. 10K races, $15 to $30 back in the day. Now $35 to $70 for some. We'll skip up to marathons that were sort of $50 to $100, and now you can pay as much as $300 for a marathon. So I think, we were surprised that actually that inflation has gone at the same rate as triathlon.
Yeah, on running. But I guess the key point with that is that triathlon had a higher starting point. It was always more expensive to enter. Obviously, it's swimming and biking and running. There's 3 courses. The facilities are that much harder. Closed roads for the bike, etc. It costs more to run. It costs more to enter. It always has for 20 years. And it's about the same amount more now as it was 20 years ago. So actually triathlon hasn't gone up that much, but it has gone up because if you look at just the inflation numbers, obviously inflation accounts for much of that rise. But if you look at just the inflation and you just calculated for inflation, for example, a $50 entry fee from 20 years ago should be around the $85 to $90 mark now. And it's more like $150 to $200 mark now. So it's more than just inflation. There's some other factors coming into this. So we tried to figure out what those were.
Yeah, I mean, there's things like making races safer, especially in triathlon when we've got the water element and the cost of that. I mean, I guess that's exacerbated with the fact that it is so expensive in the first place, and then that increase is going to have to be passed on. Also, like we were talking about earlier in the show, the technology aspects of having your tracker, having a chip timing that maybe we didn't used to have. And is that to control the numbers because we've got more people doing it, or is it just something that we as the athletes are demanding, but not thinking about the cost behind it?
Yeah. Also, there's the enhanced race experience that a lot of triathletes have come to expect, especially races like Ironman, where you get a bag and you get a finisher's medal that's big and bold, and you get a T-shirt and you get a race cap and a whole bunch of other superfluous stuff, which is great because you can show everyone that you did an Ironman. But it also pushes the cost up to the organisers, and that cost is definitely going to be passed on to the entries. So is it just a case of you getting what you pay for? And if they did away with all of that, your race would be cheaper, as you will see at some of your local triathlons. But then people don't enter those local triathlons. They favour going to the big Ironmans where there's more prestige involved, and so the local ones die, and so there's more and more demand for the big ones and less demand for the local ones. And so we see entry fees going up even more. So it's a lot. There's a lot of things going on. There's also insurance and permits for those race organisers. Now, as we said, arguably races are safer today, but also perhaps triathletes are a little bit more litigious. They might actually sue race organisers when things go wrong, whereas 20 years ago they might be less likely to do so. More kind of self-responsibility for your own safety in a race and on a race course, and now you see passing it all on to the organisers, so they need more police on the course, they need completely closed roads, etc. It all adds up to the prices going up. But as we say, it did the same in running races, didn't it?
Well, I think running and triathlon come into the same bracket when you start to look at that sort of superfluous income that people have to spend on what is fun, what is a hobby, so to speak. And the fact that whatever's happening in the world, we've had the crash in 2008, we've got whatever's happening right now in the world economy of just everything, inflation going up and feeling like people have less money maybe to spend on those fun things. Any increase is going to feel bigger than it would have done maybe back when there was more disposable income.
Yeah, and I think a triathlon, obviously being at the more expensive end of the spectrum, suffers more from less people having that expendable income. Cost of living crisis is going to affect triathlons and their expensive entry fees more than it's going to affect running races, because still more people will be able to afford the running races despite the less expendable income. So triathlon possibly because they stick a little bit higher, they catch a little bit more of the wind, and so we're actually gonna lose a little bit more in a cost of living crisis. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the triathlon world is in a crisis. I think those entry fees are mostly justified, and also triathlon brings more than just the experience of that actual race. You're buying a lifestyle, you're buying a kind of health and lifestyle thing. And actually, Will McCloy made a very funny joke on. Will McCloy is the commentator for the Super League Triathlon, Australian, so take it with a pinch of salt. He says lots of people are saying it's expense, but when you look at the other midlife crises, such as having an affair, alcoholism, or a Porsche, it's actually quite reasonable. He makes a joke, of course, but he kind of also hits the point. For what it is and for what triathlon does to many people's lifestyles, it's actually pretty cheap at the price. I mean, it's not cheap. As a hobby goes, you can just run, which is a lot cheaper. But for what it gives to a lot of people, it's actually well worth it. And I think we're not going to see it going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I think if you put it under the umbrella of health and fitness, and we're seeing the amount of money that people are spending on that, and actually triathlon does usually make you fitter, does usually make you healthy. I think that needs a little bit of an asterisk next to it on the whole. But if you think of that of, improving your life, your quality of life and your lifespan, then actually it comes under the health and fitness bracket, and there's actually a lot of money going into that. So maybe triathlon crosses into that area.
And also you can shop around. You don't have to go to the top of the end Ironman product. You can go for much cheaper local triathlons. They do still exist, maybe less so than they did 20 years ago, but there are still lots of them around. And if you shop local, and if you go, for example, challenge races are significantly cheaper than Ironman races, and then you go to your local one, it's significantly cheaper again. Maybe you don't get the same prestige, and maybe you don't get the same swag bag from it, but you do get the same experience, and you do get the same lifestyle experience. You may even get a better experience. So there are options to keep doing triathlon, even if your expendable income has decreased a little bit. I guess our question to the audience is, well, firstly, I'm going to ask you this. What's the most expensive triathlon you've ever entered, and was it worth the money?
Oh, yeah. What did you get with it? How good was the swag bag, or how great was your race experience? Yeah, what do you think? We would love to hear your comments in the section below. Of is it the cost of the actual entering the event that's putting you off triathlon, or maybe you're not being put off triathlon at all and you think it's on the rise? Or
was it just all the equipment, and it's not the race entries at all? It's just having a bike and all that kind of stuff and maintaining it that actually puts you off the cost of triathlon. Leave your comments down below. We'd love to hear from you. Now it's time for What the Tech. And Giant have finally unveiled the Trinity Advanced SL. Now this has been, well, I guess the worst kept secret in triathlon and cycling, because everyone knew that a disc brake version of this bike was coming for ages. Gustav Iden actually rode it in Kona already, and their pros have had it for a while, but finally it has been launched. And I think Gustav Iden might have been the last pro riding rim brakes before he got this bike, just before Kona last year. But anyway, it's finally been released to the public. It's the Trinity Advanced SL range, and there's also the Trinity Advanced SL time trial bike specifically for UCI races. It is, according to Giant, the new bike is lighter, stiffer, and more aerodynamic than the outgoing model. But obviously, the big news on this one is the disc brakes. Finally, Giant has got a TT bike with disc brakes. It's apparently going to save you 5.9 watts at 45 k's an hour, which is significant over their previous model, though how that compares to other bikes, we're not so sure.
Well, alongside this, Giant's sister brand, Liv, have released theirs. It is the Avow Advanced SL, which looks very similar as a bike. It just has slightly different dimensions to fit with the women's physique and some slightly different colours. But it has all of the main features that we're seeing, like having disc brakes, the major one. We've also got a change in the cockpit. It's been redesigned, switching from that dual armrest riser into a mono riser setup.
Yeah, and the triathlon-specific version of these bikes also has integrated nutrition and storage for your hydration. It's got a bento box on the top, and then it's also got hydration between the down tube and the seat tube with a straw that goes all the way up to your armrest pads. Now, prices for the complete triathlon bike start at £6,499 or €7,500 for the Trinity Advanced SL2 and rise to £10,499 or €12,000 for the Trinity Advanced SL0 with SRAM Red axis and the new Cadex Aero 4-spoke wheel system.
It is now time for Try Spy, and last week we had this photo which got you all guessing. We only had 5 correct. We had Hatchet427 suggesting that it might have been Sarah Perez Sala, I think. Well, yeah. I'm afraid you were wrong on
Sam
that one.
G said Kat Matthews, as did Amador, both also wrong. And our first correct answer was Jay Rugalvayo, and he said Chelsea Sadara, and it was Chelsea Sadara. We had a couple others who got it right. Amedres Atigechi, Barry M. also got it right. Giorgio Savino got it right, and Swimbike Rory also got it right, saying try the badass try mom. Chelsea Sadara, it was. This week we have this image. Can you tell whose chin that is?
Yeah, well, don't forget to use the hashtag TrySpy when you leave your suggestions. And if anyone is brave enough, then you can try and say what race it might be. I mean, good luck with that one.
Yeah, that would be optimistic. Say what? Okay, time to look at some of your comments under our videos. And last week, Heather put out a kettlebell workout for you to follow along and do some good triathlon kettlebell workouts. And she filmed it right here in this studio, which got some of you cringing.
Yeah, you were. I mean, I appreciate your concern. You were very worried about this beautiful bike that might be just on screen now, but it is still in one piece. And no one and no bikes were injured in the filming of the kettlebell workout.
We did get a few comments. Julian Ulrich said, imagine the kettlebell hitting the bike, sweaty face. And Multi Whatever said, just please move farther away from the tri-bike on the wall. Fair enough. But I think Heather had safe hands.
I did my risk assessment. Checked the bike was okay.
She wasn't going to let the kettlebell go flying out of her hands.
Oh dear. Well, that is it for this week's show. We've got plenty of videos coming up, including one that is 0 to hero with our resident triathlete or relatively newbie triathlete, Phil. Now, you might recognise Phil from the odd video in the past. Well, he is taking on an Ironman this year, and he is starting from pretty much zero fitness.
Yeah, that video is out now. You can watch that on the channel. Upcoming, though, Mark this week attempted to do Jacob Ingebrigtsen's double threshold day run.
Ooh.
Now, if you don't know who Jacob Ingebrigtsen is, well, he's the pretty much best runner in the middle distance in the world. And Mark tried to do his double threshold day, and I went along to take his lactate measurements because I wasn't going to do the day. And it makes for a pretty good video, pretty interesting to delve into what the Norwegians are doing and also just what Jacob Ingebrigtsen is doing and watch Mark suffer at the same time. That video coming out this exactly. That video coming out this week on the channel, so give that a watch. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss that video, and also hit that like button. It does help to support the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next week.
See you.